Welcome, my friend, to the study. Tonight we take a journey into Roman cult religion, shrouded in mystery, the cults of the god Mithras, and we will even visit Mithraeum, located in the very fringes of the Roman Empire in Londinium. An early example of the Greek form of the name is in a 4th century BC work by Xenophon. The Cyropaedia, or Cyropaedia, a biography of the Persian king Cyrus the Great. The name Mithras, from the Greek Mithras, is a form of Mithra. The name alone seems to draw on more ancient practices. Sanskrit Mitra is a name of the sun god, and its origins might appear lost in the mists of time, very like Tolkien's introduction to his mythical fantasy, Lord of the Rings. History became legend. Legend became myth. We have a clue from the scant references dating from the height of its popularity during the Roman Empire that the religion of the name of the god Mithras appears to be used in the nominative case, whereas earlier Porphyry in his Greek text De Abstinentia refers to the histories, now lost, of the Mithraic mysteries by Eobolus and Pallas. His wording points to these authors' treatment of the name Mithra as a foreign word and therefore indeclinable. So our knowledge of grammar can enlighten many things for us. The god Mithras was the center of a Roman mystery cult or religion originally inspired by the Persian Zoroastrian god Mithra, which in turn had pre-Zoroastrian origins. By the time the Romans took up this veneration, Mithras had become linked to a new and distinctive imagery, combining Persian and Greco-Roman practices, and would become popular within the Imperial Roman army. All the way into the 4th century, when the empire began its swift decline, and the religion was faced with persecution from early Christians. By the end of the 4th century, it had become so suppressed, it was pretty much eliminated in the empire. As it was a closed religion, there is only a small amount of sources from which to draw the details of this mysterious cult. There are numerous archaeological finds across what was once the greater Roman Empire, including meeting places, monuments, and many artifacts, inscriptions, examples of Mithras killing a bull, number among many other artifacts, as well as worshipping sites called Mithraea. It has been estimated that there would have been at least 680 Mithraea in the city of Rome alone. scenes of Mithras show him being born from a rock and sharing a banquet with Sol, the sun god. The image specific to and central within the Mithraea of the Roman cult is of Mithras slaughtering a sacred bull. Mithras is clothed in Anatolian costume and wears a Phrygian cap. He who kneels on the bull, holding it by its head, horns, or nostrils, with his left hand, as he stabs at it with his right, is the god and image at the head of the Mithraic temple. The figure of Sol, the sun god, looks down on him benevolently. No written narratives or theology from this religion remain extant, but there are some references in graffiti, as well as in a few pieces of Greek and Latin literature, and the Roman authors there referred to this religion as the mysteries of the Persians. As it was not a publicly practiced religion, the details of its secretive rituals remain obscure. Some of the fragments of literature mentioning Mithras are from Statius in about 80 AD. In his Thebaid, an epic poem, Mithras is pictured in a cave wrestling with a creature with horns. There is a prayer to the god Phoebus, and the cave is described as Persei, which is usually translated in this context as Persian. This Perseian refers to Perseus, who was the son of Perseus and Andromeda, Perseus being the ancestor of the Persians according to Greek legend. Next, in about 145 AD, Mithras is mentioned by the early Christian apologist Justin Martyr, who charges this cult with imitating the Christian communion rite. It is next mentioned in the same century by the Greco-Roman biographer Plutarch, who writes about the secret mysteries of Mithras which were practiced by the pirates of Cilicia, a coastal province in the southeast of Anatolia, modern Turkey. These pirates are said by Plutarch to have offered strange sacrifices, those of Olympus, and they celebrated certain secret mysteries, among which those of Mithras continue to this day, being originally instituted by them. And then, in the 2nd and 3rd century, Cassius Dio, or Dio Cassius the historian, writes about how the name of Mithras was spoken during the state visit to Rome of Tiridates of Armenia. It was during the reign of Nero, and Tiridates was receiving the crown. He said to the Roman emperor, he revered him as he did Mithras. This is pointed to as perhaps the beginning of the emergence of popularity of the cult. The next century saw Porphyry, the philosopher, giving an account of the origin of the mysteries in his work De Antro Nympharum, or the Cave of Nymphs. Citing Eubulus as his source, Porphyry writes that the original Temple of Mithras was indeed a natural cave containing fountains which Zoroaster found in the mountains of Persia. To Zoroaster, the cave itself was an image representing the whole of the earth. He then consecrated the cave to Mithras, the creator of the world. Porphyry also links Mithras and the bull with the planets and star signs, such as Aries, Mars, and Venus. An oath and catechism survive, contained in a document known as the Mithras Liturgy from 4th century Egypt, and included are fragments from an oath-taking ceremony. These few references, along with the archaeology, give us an idea of Mithraic practices and initiation. Because Mithras is depicted being born from a rock and is shown as emerging nude already in his youth, with a dagger in one hand and a torch in the other. Mithras is depicted being born from a rock and is shown as emerging nude already in his youth, with a dagger in one hand and a torch in the other. According to his stages and different symbols, there was a complex system of 7 grades of initiation and communal ritual feasts and meals, as well as secret handshakes. Indeed, in Sanskrit and ancient Persian, Mithra can also mean a contract, which is sealed by the shaking of hands. The Mithraeans met in an underground temple called a Mithraeum. This is where the initiation would take place, in this cavern-like temple, similar to that into which Mithras carried the bull after having hunted it, ridden it, and overwhelmed its strength. Sometimes this cavern is surrounded by a circle, holding 12 signs of the zodiac. On one side, at the top, is Sol, the sun, with his flaming crown, sometimes driving a quadriga or 4-horse chariot. His ray of light reaches down to touch Mithras. On the other side, at the top, is Luna, in her crescent moon shape, sometimes depicted driving a biga or 2-horse chariot. There are many variations in the reliefs depicting Mithras. Sometimes he is shown as coming out of the rock as a child, and in one instance he has a globe in one hand, or a thunderbolt. There are also depictions in which flames are shooting from the rock or from Mithras' cap. One statue had its base perforated so that it could serve as a fountain, and the base of another has the mask of the water god. Sometimes Mithras also has other weapons, such as bows and arrows, and there are also animals, sometimes dogs, serpents, dolphins, eagles, other birds, lions, crocodiles, lobsters, and snails. On some reliefs, there is a bearded figure identified as Oceanus, the water god, and on some there are the gods of the four winds. In these reliefs, four elements could be invoked together, sometimes the four winds, or sometimes the four gods Victoria, Luna, Sol, and Saturn. Saturn, in particular, is often seen handing over the dagger or short sword so Mithras can kill the bull. Also mysterious is the prevalence of a naked lion-headed figure entwined with serpents. Needless to say, we can draw many parallels to the epics and mythology, which would suggest nothing so much as that the men who practiced this religion were educated in this material and knew it well. The temples of Mithras, or Mithraea, are sunken below ground, windowless, and very distinctive. In cities, the basement of an apartment block might be converted. Elsewhere, the ground might be excavated and vaults constructed over top, and other places even converted from an already formed natural cave. Common throughout the empire, they are, however, unevenly distributed, with considerable numbers found in larger cities, housing Roman military, and along the Rhine-Danube frontier, as well as in Britain, Dalmatia, and even some in Egypt and Syria. Mithraea tend to be small, externally undistinguished, and cheaply constructed, commonly located close to springs or streams. Fresh water appears to have been required for some Mithraic rituals, and a basin is often incorporated into the structure. There is a narthex or antechamber at the entrance, and often other rooms for storage and preparation of the food for the feast. These Mithraea that have been excavated present us with actual physical remains of the architectural structures of the sacred spaces of a Mithraic cult. In basic form, Mithraea were entirely different from the temples and shrines of other cults. The standard pattern of Roman religious precincts meant that temple building was a house for the god, who was intended to be able to be seen and view through the opened doors and columned portico. Sacrificial worship was offered on an altar set in an open courtyard. However, Mithraea were completely different. For their feasts, the Mithraean initiates would recline on stone benches arranged along the long sides of the temple, where there was room for 15 to 30 men. It has been thought that perhaps these secret societies took the place of the collegia, or the Roman clubs, the gentlemen's clubs, that were open to people of a particular nobility or certain trades. Those people that were not of certain social class or of a certain trade did not belong to these collegia, and so would join the Mithric cult. So in essence, it became a gentleman's club for ungentlemen, and later soldiers. Each Mithraeum had several altars at the far end, under the central bull and god image, and a number of subsidiary altars, all in the main Mithraean chamber, and also in the antechamber or narthex, all of standard Roman pattern, with texts. Prayers were addressed to the sun 3 times a day, and Sunday was especially sacred. Spread throughout the empire, there seems to have been, however, no central supervisory authority for this cult, making it a really glorified soldiers' club in a way. There were 7 degrees or grades of initiation into Mithraism, which were listed by Saint Jerome, possibly associated with 7 planets. A mosaic in the Mithraeum at Ostia Antica depicts these 7 grades, complete with symbolic emblems connected and symbols of planets. The grades also have an inscription beside them commending each into the protection of the planetary god corresponding. Initiation to each grade naturally involved a feast, possibly also a sacrifice, and an ordeal, as some Mithraei have been found with ordeal pits, or a pit into which an initiate might have been thrown to face extreme heat or cold, or some ordeal or another. The grades would start with the corax or corvus, raven or crow, symbolized by a beaker, and ruled by the planet Mercury. The second was the nymphus or bridegroom, with the lamp was the miles, or soldier, with his symbols of pouch, helmet, lance, drum, belt, and breastplate, presided over by the god Mars. Fourth was Leo the lion, symbolized with laurel wreaths and thunderbolts, and presided over by Jupiter. Fifth was Perses the Persian, with his Phrygian cap, sickle, crescent moon, stars, and a sling, and presided over by Luna, the moon god. Sixth was Heliodromus, the sun runner, with the torch, a whip, special robes, and an image of Helios, the Titan sun god, presided over by Sol. Seventh and last was Pater, or father, with a mitre, a shepherd's staff, and a red stone ring, either ruby or garnet, chasuble or cape, and elaborate robes with jewels and metallic threads sewn in, presided over by the god Saturn. In the 1950s, a 3rd century Temple of Mithras was excavated in the heart of the city of London. More recently, between 2010 and 2014, during the building of the new Bloomberg building, 1.2 hectares were excavated in a diamond shape between Queen Victoria Street, Queen Street, Cannon Street, Bucklersbury, and Walbrook. Walbrook Street being so named because it covered the erstwhile Walbrook stream, a tributary of the Thames River. A nod to this stream and its significance is attested in the new sculpture next to the Bloomberg building, depicting the ancient creek bed of the old Walbrook. It was here, during this excavation, that some 400 stylus tablets were found, some still legible, that give us an even greater insight into the goings-on not only in the Mithras cult but in Londinium itself. These waxed tablets were typical and used all over Rome for note-taking, account tallying, and even correspondence and legal administration. The collection at the Bloomberg site is the largest and earliest of its kind in Britain, and also includes the first known reference to London, as well as the earliest handwritten document in Britain. They are all catalogued by Roger Tomlin in his in-depth book called Rome and London's First Voices, and we'll have a look at some of the tablet images. Rome and London is thought to have been founded immediately to the east of this site, within a couple of years of the Claudian invasion. Of these 400 wooden tablets, which once contained wax for writing, and therefore only the deep scratches make it through the wax onto the wood that remains, sometimes creating complex lines and layers of scratches difficult to disentangle one from the other, let alone from the non-literate scratches, and even the wood grain itself. Much of these texts and notes have to do with financial and legal matters. Nearly all are dated to the 50s and 80s, covering that crucial period spanning from soon after the Claudian conquest through to the Boudiccan upheavals and beyond. One of them highlights a contract between a certain Venustus and a Proculus for 20 loads of provisions to be brought to Londinium in late AD 62. This particular tablet indicates a rapid recovery and support for the earlier date of the Boudiccan destruction of Londinium, and serves as an example of how each one of these is valuable in extending our understanding of life in early Roman London. Another question that can be answered or elucidated by these texts is this process of the Latinization in the Roman Empire, which has proven complex as the Roman Empire consumed lands. It also took in many peoples of differing cultures and linguistic backgrounds. This post-conquest period in Londinium shows a group of men who have produced strikingly, if not necessarily unsurprisingly, standardized Latin, in addition to using Roman formats of letters, abbreviations, and layout for their missives. There is also the unspoken reason for these peoples to have learned Latin, as it opened up a wealth of opportunities for Latin speakers in the empire, and for writers in the army, writers in commerce, production, and offering inhabitants access to wider markets, to legal support, and to documentation. Non-official writings found here seem to have been produced by cavalry housed in Londinium before deployment elsewhere in the expanding province of Britannia. In addition to those tablets probably generated through activity at this site itself. So, my friend, have you enjoyed coming with me to the realm of history that has been shrouded in mystery? Archaeology and putting together bits of text. I hope you are nice and relaxed. Be good to yourself. Be to others.